everyone. I am Alina Novopoltseva, and I am ready to share my presentation, which calls DAF, or the Samurai's Way in Secure Development. What are we going to talk about? First, why secure development is important, how to evaluate your development processes, what kind of tools are used, pros and contras about available frameworks, why did we decide to develop our own DevSecOps assessment framework, the model of assessment, practices, and results. I am an expert of IT security, of Jet Infosystems, a leading Russian system integrator. We introduce secure development tools, business processes, and automation. My job is to develop strategy, evaluate efficiency, and build good relations between developers and security people. Why do we need secure development practices? I am going to tell you obvious things, but experience shows us that obvious things are not obvious to everyone. It's important to do it to comply with regulator requirements. Of course, most of the requirements are going to be fulfilled. Then, when you introduce automation, automatic checkups, automatic vulnerability detection, we raise efficiency and elimination of errors, which helps us to accelerate time to market and maintain reputation and customer reliance, customer trust. Then those practices increase efficiency of interaction between developers and security experts. We minimize resources which are required to eliminate vulnerabilities and defects. Best practices say that security should be included at all stages of development. And finally, well, the clicker seems to fail. The clicker doesn't work. Oh, it works. Then practices increase the level of knowledge of the participants of the process in security. How are we going to introduce the process? Each process should begin with evaluation. What for? First, we have to look at whether the company follows best practices. Some teams usually are far ahead. Others didn't touch security issues at all. We came to one company with the audit, and security development is at a very low level. And we started interviewing different teams, talked to several teams. They don't have anything. They talk to security people once every year. But the last team surprised us because the level of maturity was very, very high. Why? And it turned out that the team leader was interested in matching the security requirements. He called security people a lot of time, and then he hired OPSEC people in the team. He introduced all the teams, he audited the codes, looked at falses, and ran pin tests. A genial person. It happens sometimes. So the levels of different teams can be very different. Second, why to audit? We have to realize whether you match the compliance requirement. And the third reason is to get a fresh look at your processes. Maybe you are used to some things which are not required. Maybe you are missing something. Fresh view. Every kind of audit should produce some result. You should determine the vectors of further development. To do that, we can use frameworks. Framework is a very wide term. It depends on where you use frameworks. But here, in my presentation, framework is the set of principles, rules, and tools and processes which help us develop secure software. The framework should consist of three things: the set of practices, the model of maturity, and the methodological of evaluation. Before doing anything on your own, you have to go and have a look at what is available elsewhere. All of you who used DevSecOps saw those things. We worked a lot with those approaches and frameworks, but each time something was missing. We wanted to add something here, add something there. The SIM, for example, BSIM, no model of no maturity model. A lot of practices, good practices, but no security model. SAM, a lot of practices and maturity level is there, but some practices are not for our market exactly. Very high level practices. DSOM, excellent security model, maturity model, but the number of practices do not embrace the entire process of development. Microsoft SDL is very simple and understandable, but it's very basic. It is not sufficient. We decided to look at what we actually want, what is missing, and we realized that we are missing the practices which embrace the entire process of secure development with good level of details. Second, we didn't have practice which are focused on the Russian market exactly. They should be applicable in Russia. Third, we wanted to develop a very simple process of evaluation without evaluating some queer figures and fill in the forms. That's just press a button and get the result. Then, many companies try to learn about their current maturity level and what they need to raise their level of maturity. Usually, you have a lot of practices, we have very few levels. Then we needed visualization. We wanted to have a look and see whether it's good or bad without analyzing the figures. And then step-by-step approach to maturity level. We need this step now, next we shall need that step, and that step, on and on. All the practices are described globally, they are not step-by-step practices, and all the practices do not answer the question, what are we going to start with? To answer that question, any security person has to go along the samurai's way. Why samurai? In my world, the global goal of any specialist is to reach the state of absolute security, but that level is not achievable. So way is the goal. The final point cannot be achieved. So we have to go on and on and on along the way. First of all, you have to define your current level. Second, define the vector of further development. Third, you have to fix our goal. What are we going to achieve? Then we have to define the initiatives and the measures to be taken to get to the final goal. Then we calculate the amount of resources and the budget. Then we develop the roadmap with all the events and the timeline. And then we have to work just a little bit. And after that, we have to go along the whole round, again and again. We wanted to simplify the road, the circle, the cycle. So our team work in the following way. We didn't like the current frameworks. We decided to develop our own. Of course, we used the most developed practices, BSIM, DSOM, and others. We read a lot of standards, best practices from the vendors. We learned billions of articles. Articles without practices may be good, but the most important thing is the people with experience who will tell you whether practices are applicable or not. So the main thing is our experience and experience of our customers, because a lot of people were involved. Our employees from different departments, development, security, and people from outside the company, external sources. We finalized our framework, developed the evaluation strategy, and I am going to tell you about it later. What do we offer to our samurai? What is DAF? 3 artifacts. First, the pirate map. The pirate map, the evaluation chart, and the maturity pyramid. I will tell you about each of them one by one. The first point is the pirate map. The pirate map is a top-level view of the entire framework. It consists of practice blocks. Each block covers a certain area. After we fill in the questionnaire, the card uses green, yellow, and red colors. Green is okay, yellow is so-so, red is something to work with. So let me tell you about the blocks inside. The first 2 include the practices which are focused on something that is not developed yet. It's about the environment. It's the control of artifacts, management of artifacts, components, then security of workplaces, secrets of the environment, built environment, everything about environment. The second block is everything about the code, something which is actually developed. Static analysis, composition analysis, image analysis, search of the secrets, and control of the Docker file security. The third block is about the software which is already in runtime, but not in PROM yet. Dynamic analysis, functional security tests, and control of configurations. And the final block is protection of the software in production. What is important to realize? Secure development does not exist in a vacuum. It intersects with other processes, IT processes, testing, for instance, security processes, monitoring, pin tests, a lot of different things. And something which is adjacent is shown in the dotted line, broken line. If you want to look at it, we're going to touch it. If it is not interesting to you and they don't want to deal with it, then we are going to skip them and use only those with solid lines. All those blocks belong to different areas: environment, code development, testing, and operation. What about security champion? What about methodology? When we don't forget it, this is just part of the pirate map. DevSecOps is not about technology and automation, it's about culture and the people. No matter how scanners you have, what kind of automation there is a developer who can bring in a library on its own disk. Then processes and methodology. The processes cannot be linked to a certain environment. They go through everything. First is training and knowledge base, then development and management of security requirements to software, then management of defects, processing of defects, and consolidation of defects. And two last blocks: evaluation of efficiency, everything about metrics, and functional roles, security champions and other roles. The processes are very important. Without processes, we just automate chaos and nothing works well. So the pirate map should always be in your mind. The next artifact is the evaluation chart. It's the only thing which is filled in this framework, something which requires human involvement. We have to fill in the status of the practices. Practices are clear and these are the step-by-step practices, and practices depend on each other. For example, let's take static analysis. If static analysis is not carried out, then all other practices will be red. If static analysis is carried out, but the code base is not scanned fully, then it will be yellow and then red. You don't have to look at each practice depending on the previous practices. The previous practices depend on all the rest. After that, we get the heat map. Heat map. It's important because we need good visualization, we need color codes, we need pictures. It's easy to look at the heat map and see what is green, what is yellow, what is red. And then you can easily and quickly see where the problem is. Also, we can see that at each subdomain with practices, there are their own level, but they are not maturity levels. They are levels of practice development. Maturity level will be covered later. These are the maturity level. This is a pyramid of maturity. All the practices are spread across the pyramid. We have 8 levels. 0 is chaos, you don't have anything at all. Then minimum and base level, you start introducing certain practices. Gradually you introduce more and more. People understand that security in development is important. Then at levels 3, 4, and 5, the practices are scaled up. Before, the practices were applied to critical applications only. Now we apply them everywhere. We expand the tool sets. And at the last 2, expert and space level, we use the most modern best practices, which require a lot of resources, and few people reached them, but they exist. A few more things about the pyramid. The most difficult thing was that pyramid, the most difficult thing to develop. Because, we have different practices. And those practices, what kind of level does it depend on? What kind of level does it belong to? It requires expert opinion. And at the moment when we finalized the pyramid, Kirill said, and went to Egypt because he was sick and tired. I'm not going to show you the pyramid in detail. It's big. Just one section, one example. Secret management, SM. At the 0 level, we have nothing, no security management at all. At the first level, the tools do not exist, but secrets are stored and secured by some local tools. Then we get specialized tools, but they are used in a fragmented way, not everywhere, not for all teams. And we start dividing access rights to secret depending on the area of the usage. At the 3rd level, we manage the secret life cycle with a specialized instrument by all teams. At level 6, we use full-scale dynamic secrets and rotation politics. Why did we leaped over levels 4 and 5? It's very difficult to fulfill the requirements of level 3. And level 3 goes through levels 4 and 5. They are interrelated, and it's just expanded through 3 levels. We have 3 useful artifacts, and we decided to include FTE solver here, or calculator, if you like. Of course, we define important practices and the target states and the events, but the most important thing is how much resources do we need? How many resources do we need? Practice may be excellent, but what about resources? What about FTE? Fill in the questionnaire, include the number of applications to be involved, and the wages of the specialists, the number of people, and their payroll for a year. For example, This is what we need for SAST at the expert level, for 10 applications. Of course, depending on the practices you are going to use, the requirements will be different. DAF, depending on your questionnaire, will calculate everything in FTE, and maybe some things will be omitted. What does DAF provide? It gives you the understanding of where you are. It gives you the understanding of what is going to be done next, in which area you are going to move, in which direction. And then DAF tells you what kind of investment to use and how to prove that investment, how to substantiate it. What about the summarized way? DAF simplifies the first 5 steps, the longest and the most labor-intensive. It defines the rest of the way. You will just have to generate the roadmap and do something practically. Please evaluate my presentation and the presentations of other speakers. It's important for us. We have a roadmap of our framework further development. I didn't show you nice pictures. I can share it. The framework goes through the final review, and in the next slide I'm going to show you the QR as a link for our community, where we're going to share and discuss and comment and talk about the framework, about whether it's applicable, whether you like it or not. At this point, I would like to complete my presentation. Thank you very much. Thank you. It was a very interesting presentation. Thank you. I liked it. How shall we build the process of interaction with the developers? It's good that they want to deal with security, but they don't want what it is. How can we explain it to them? Of course, it's very good when a security specialist is in the development team, but if not, what shall we do? If there is a person who would like to join. Well, let me redefine your question. What shall we do if security doesn't have enough competence to work with developers, but developers want security very much? Well, security should develop, of course, and grow up and teach security specialists, developers. So security should also share with the developers. They can pass through training courses. There are customers and there are contractors and subcontractors who can show you. So you have a lot of options actually to learn. You need the time, the desire to learn. Thank you very much for your presentation. I'm not DevSecOps, I'm OPSEC rather. So no matter how nice we build the process, a certain person can bring in his own bad library on his media. When we tune everything, so we can build our own database with certain utilities, I can deal with advertising, because we work at this scanner, which potentially is going to check all open source libraries to look for vulnerabilities and malicious codes. And bad dependencies and so on. So the question is, the process can check and recheck before somebody brings in and installs something bad.
Thank you for the question. It's about automating human lack of mindfulness, so to say. Thank you for the comments, but if a person deliberately wants to do something, they would be able to do that, regardless what tools we have. If a developer doesn't have the mindset that security is important, they would find a way. They would deactivate checks, they would complain to top management that we're losing money because of over-security. So people are the starting point, and equally important is their understanding that security is important. Yes, hello. Thank you for the presentation. And thank you for the framework. I don't know why people like inventing frameworks. I think that Swordfish had a similar venture. So you said that you talked to customers, you did customer development interviews, and so looking at the pyramids, what is the level of maturity of customers and clients in Russia? Where's the median point? Well, the median point, sad as it might sound, is the transition from Tier 2 to Tier 3. They are trying hard. Question. So does that mean that let's implement SAST into the pipeline? Are they at that stage, or where are they? Answer. Well, let's build SAST into the pipeline. That would be 1 to 2. No, that level of maturity is rather let's customize the settings. Let's try and scale up practices to more teams, not just to critical applications. So that's further growth. That's not exactly the basic level. Okay, thank you. Good afternoon. Thank you for the presentation. I have a question to your presentation. At the beginning, you said that your process, your framework, helps reduce ATM. That sounds unusual because, TTM, time to market. If anything, additional practices tend to extend the TTM because there's more to be implemented, and pen tests happen before releases, sometimes taking up to a month. So usually, the more practices you have, the longer the TTM. How were you able to reduce the TTM? Answer. Well, of course, when you implement something, the first response would be, oh, that's difficult. Why do we want to do that? And at the beginning, your TTM would be higher. You can't avoid that. But after these practices have been implemented, after they become a routine process, when everyone understands why that is needed and what it is needed for, TTM would go down. And again, implementing these practices would be better anyway than you having to face security just before the release and having to rework. And so your TTM should go down in this case.
Здрасте, спасибо, класс.
Yes, hi, thank you. Excellent presentation. Can you please go back to the FTE slide?
Если он не очень далеко.
If it's not too far away. Okay, super. Can you please share where does the data come from? Is that an expert method? Is that a reference to Forrester? Or is it an analysis of your customer, your personal experience, and your experience as a company? Well, that's a little bit of everything. That's personal experience and other sources. We have talked to a lot of people when we gathered this data. So that is a generalization of sorts. Question. So this is not then customized. Well, from my experience, customers would have many SASTs, not one, but 3 to 4, and I wonder how this table would be applicable if they have a zoo, not just from many classes of tools, but a zoo within one class with many tools. Answer: well, yes, the numbers that you see here are not carved in stone. And again, we measure a very broad average. If you don't have these numbers, at least you could take this as a starting point. Yes, that could change, but at least, again, this could be a starting point. Okay, thank you. Alina, thank you for your presentation. A short question from me, a little bit of an abstract one, but still, I'm curious. How were you able to bring together your team, with what tools, and how you were able to come up with this methodology to motivate the team and to use this pyramid, and how you were able to take this architect level 7 to Turkey or Egypt or where it is that they went to? Answer: we have a team working on this who are very mature cybersecurity people. We had 3 cybersecurity guys working on this. We have taken this assessment through an iterative process, and we understood that there were many points in common. We saw that we could make this process of assessment easier and simplify it and streamline it. Everyone was interested in getting a product that would make their life easier, ultimately. And in general, we have quite mindful people who just want to do cool things. We had an opportunity to do it, so we did it. That's at the end of in the back of the room. You mentioned this role of a security champion, and I wonder how can we motivate them? Okay, how we motivate security champions? Further comments, and I appreciate that this is a tough question. Answer: no, why? I think that there's a cool manual from Avast, I guess. I liked it about developing security champions in your organization. Clearly, there are people who are driven, and there are others who would not do anything for anything. So it's you can only do is talk to people to motivate the teams which have security champions. I don't want to motivate people by telling people you must, by coercion. And I guess the best thing is to talk and make your case and demonstrate to them how it works in other teams, and that this would make them a T-shaped specialist. Question. So essentially we motivate them by suggesting that they would improve their skills. Answer: well, if people want to get paid more, what can we do? Question: and how do you then retain them? Answer: well, it's more of a question to the HR guys, what they do, what magic they do to retain people. Okay, thank you. Alina, thank you for an excellent presentation and very relevant. And since we are on the subject of motivating the people, the architects, etc., I have a question. How do you make a team sit down and work? When you create something new, you tell people this is how things are done with us. But a more difficult problem is when you have many teams. And so have you had resistance from any teams, and how you're able to motivate them? Answer: for such teams, you can do smaller, super small changes. You can go in very small steps, not to overwhelm them with a lot of change, but to give them small changes gradually. Question: and how long does the adaptation take? if a development team is somewhere in tier 2 or 3 in the pyramid that you showed, at least we want to believe that. Is that 6 months? Is that 12 months? I guess if we implement minimum changes, if we go along the way of little changes in steps, I guess it's 1.5 to 3 months. I'm talking about smaller changes. If we talk that starting from today, your team would have a security champion and they would mentor you, or from today, we will not accept your release unless you go through hundreds of checks, then the team would naturally get defensive. But if you tell them, okay, what if we scan your code with a SAST tool to address the most critical vulnerabilities, and regarding all the other vulnerabilities, we'll just set a condition for you to eliminate in the previous release. So that seems like additional work, but not too much. So they are more eager to do that. Okay, thank you for the answer. Thank you for the presentation. To what extent your model or the framework is customized? Is there a possibility to adapt to the customer if the customer says, I don't want such a large set of practices, but still they want to get the tool with the visualization, with the FTE, with the calculation of the cost of implementation? That's my first part of the question. And the second part of the question is regarding the visualization tools. What you have seems to be some Excel spreadsheet implementation of sorts, or have you thought of making this a full-fledged standalone product? Okay, let me take your second question up front. Yes, at this stage it is an Excel spreadsheet, but we are thinking of doing it as a software. It's somewhere in our backlog, but currently, yes, it's an Excel file. You fill in all the data, and then all the other sheets would calculate automatically. Regarding automation, yes, then if for the customer some practices are not relevant, we can just mark them as not relevant. Such a feature is there. Thank you for the presentation. I think you have covered my question just now. What I wanted to share, what I wanted to ask, how does your framework operate if your customer, the one who uses the framework, doesn't have its own operations? Say we develop a product and the product is quite sophisticated and we don't have a production environment. It's only the customer that has the production environment. So that means then in your map, this big chunk of operations just is not there, is not relevant. Answer. Then we'll just consider the environments in which the product exists. Well, there are different situations, and yes, it may not be relevant. So, what I wanted to ask, where does DevSecOps end then, in your view? Because operations is not always DevSecOps. Answer, I understand that. We added into this framework all the practices that we thought are this or another way relevant to DevSecOps. That depends on the company, whether they want to consider those complementary processes or not. Where does DevSecOps end? It has no end. When we hand over to production, it doesn't end there, because there would be some further changes that would certainly affect operations. So for me, the safe security development life cycle never ends. It's just a cycle. Thank you for the presentation. For an average company, how much time does it take to do an audit under this framework, and how strong the client team is involved in that? People are busy, and it's important to both do the audit and do your own work. Do you mean the interviews? Well, if a customer asks, can you assess me under your framework from start to finish, how much time could it take? Answer, 5 to 6 days. What about the level of involvement? Question, answer, you mean from the customer side? That takes 2 to 3 days. Okay, thank you. Thank you for the presentation. My question is about finding vulnerabilities. You talked about various methods. Have you used a machine learning method to classify vulnerabilities? And if yes, does it work well? And if not, why don't you try it? Answer, our team doesn't do machine learning. That is why we didn't do that. Thank you. Alina, thank you for the presentation. You said you compared Cisco, Microsoft, and other approaches. We have a government standard of 2016, and it's yet another time when we don't see it. And why? Is it because many companies see it as an unfortunate solution that only applies to government companies? Yes, so that is the government standard of 2016 on secure development of software. Answer, I guess I mentioned that reason. The best practices just cover this government standards, and hence the reason why we didn't highlight it specifically. We know about it, and we know that best practices cover it. Question. So essentially what you showed doesn't fit the Russian environment or the Russian government standards. What do you mean? Well, the table that you showed repeatedly said that's not fit for Russia. Does the government standard not fit for Russia either? Well, it's not that they don't fit in their entirety. It's just that some practices are outside of our reality, such as, for example, you develop a standards of configuration, you're welcome to share it with the community. But we don't do that, or do a lot of that here. So the practices that are applicable in our country, we included them in the standards, and yes, because they are best practices, they sort of incorporated government standard. Okay, thank you. Good afternoon, thank you for the presentation, and my question is this. You talked about the retraining of all teams or implementation in the business. Did you think about providing this library related to DevSecOps to universities to learn about it, or providing some online courses? Answer, no, we didn't provide it to universities. Why? Because very soon we will have an MVP, and I previously put up a QR to a community where we will announce it. So we won't provide it to universities specifically, we'll just make it public. And if the guys from universities check it out, it's fine. But we don't want to work with universities deliberately. Next question. Your objective was to create a product that was free of the disadvantages of existing solutions. Have you been able to approach this goal, and what's your assessment of the product? Answer, well, it's very subjective, isn't it? I just think that it's a stellar product, but again, that's the reason why we want to share it with the community, to get some feedback from people other than those with whom we have already communicated. But I believe it's a great thing, and we are already using this in our project activity. Thank you very much.